All right. Hey, everyone. This is Josh, J.C.L. Faltot for The Writer's Lens. And this is a special recorded session that will be going on my podcast, but I anticipate it to be on perhaps multiple podcasts. I'm an author of science fiction, and I also happen to be the leader of a group of creative voices here in Cleveland, Ohio, which is the reason for this sort of multi-group session today. If you're just listening, there will be other voices on this. And if you're on YouTube and you can see this, you'll be able to see all their wonderful faces. So we'll be joining forces today to talk a little bit about voices in the digital age. So with me on this call right now are some good friends of mine from Cleveland, Ohio. Brian Del Turco of Jesus Smart, the podcast, and Substance TV. Willie Scott of Better Than Blended and Team Kingdom Impact Publishing. And Brent McLaughlin, who is kind of like a resident prophet, I think, in this group. So if each of you guys want to say hello, go ahead.
Let's start with the prophet.
No prophet. I'm just a writer with a lot of thoughts.
It's so humble.
Try to be humble. It's where the best thoughts come.
Right.
So, basically, I'm a writer, aspiring writer. Many years ago, I was sitting on a chair, Myrtle Beach, next to the pool, reading a book by John Eldredge called Walking with God. And I remember reading this passage. It really struck me. And it was just prior, I had gotten the thoughts of writing in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. It never really occurred to me before. I was just reading this book, kind of rekindled in my faith. And when I read this passage, it was the exact feeling I had in my heart that, I don't know, I was ambivalent to writing. John Eldredge was talking about having a struggle with writing, and just some days he wakes up. He's a New York Times best-selling author, known for what's his number one book?
Probably
Help me out.
Wild at Heart, probably.
Yeah, Wild at Heart. I'm sorry, just blanking there. But essentially, I kind of I was matched my heart on that issue, and I kind of walked away with a pretty strong understanding that I was supposed to write in some way, shape, or form. And so not too long after that, Josh and I got connected, and we began kind of a dialogue of what it means to write. Wrote a lot of different things. I'm currently not published. I do aspire to do that at some point, but definitely a lot of my thoughts and ideas are directed between me and the Lord, and just trying to fuel a very, very real life calling. In terms of digitally, I don't have a large digital footprint. I think you guys are here from these other gentlemen here tonight, what that really means to do that and do it effectively. But I don't discount the fact that at some point I will have to have a digital footprint in order to succeed in this realm. So I'm encouraged by these guys. I hope that my impact in the world will be, as I kind of began, one of a humble statement of the things that the living God has done in my life. And so that's kind of me. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I love entertaining ideas, philosophy, theology.
Come on.
And I hope that my writing is inspirational. That's definitely the goal. Sometimes it might not be, but that's certainly the goal.
That's good, man. That's good. Brian, you next?
Yeah, well, I've been blogging for I don't know, 6, 7 years, 8 years. I'm not even sure.
Hmm.
And so I'm one of these guys. These guys probably feel the same way too. I believe that everything goes back to writing. Everything starts with writing,
Mm-hmm.
not only as a sort of a medium of ideation and thinking clearly, but so many things can spring off of writing,
Mm-hmm.
like video creation or podcasting or course creation or sermons or speeches or
Mm-hmm.
talks. So yeah, just a big believer in writing. So then in the past year and a half, podcasting has come into the mix.
Hmm.
And of course, I've been working with social media, and so yeah, I just I'm very interested in the realm of narratives, big narrative pictures, and the so-called narrative wars, and getting into the marketplace of ideas and narratives, and with a voice, a rising voice, and because of technology today, certainly with the web,
Mm-hmm.
it's really flattened everything out and given us great power and leverage to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just interested in creating content for content's sake. I'm interested in the outcomes of content. What can content do?
Mm-hmm.
So it can create movements. It can,
Mm-hmm.
you can, startups can come out of content, organizations, causes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very, very interested in those areas.
So you do a lot of commenting on just societal, cultural issues, through that gospel lens primarily, right, Brian? I mean, as far as what you're.
Yeah. What Josh means by the gospel is,
Mm-hmm.
the gospel of Jesus Christ, the
Mm-hmm.
gospel of the kingdom. Certainly coming from a biblical worldview, not a religious worldview, not a churchy worldview.
Because there is a
Not
difference.
Oh my
Right.
goodness,
Yep.
yeah, and there's a lot of baggage out there regarding church. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm a believer in church, but there's been an incredible amount of dysfunction and toxicity in some realms of church.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I think that Jesus Christ, what he's offering us is a call back to design,
Hmm.
that we've really departed from original design,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
which is optimal living, and he's calling us back to that. So I am interested in the gospel of the kingdom and I'm not the only person talking about this, of course. I'm just trying to stay in the taillights of a whole lot of other voices too on this, but uh, a call back to design and living our best optimal life now, like in the realm of relational well-being, finances, our work, our career, our calling, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
but also, well, Jesus made claims that the future sort of belongs to him and it belongs to his kingdom. And so the future is very bright, but we can live our best lives now too. So a few thoughts along those lines. I'm sure we'll, in this episode and probably in future episodes, try to dive deeper, but I'm looking forward to the dialogue.
That's good. That's good stuff, man.
These guys here, we're part of a writers group called the Pens of Steel.
That's right.
Had to take a good cutting edge name there, I guess. So yeah, we've already got some momentum and continuity and dialogue we've been having,
Mm-hmm.
and so I know where this can go, and I think I'm kind of excited about you kind of listening in on that.
Excellent.
Right. Awesome.
So Willie Scott, then you were the last guy on this introduction portion here. What do you got to say, man?
I'm just blessed to be here. I appreciate just being able to be a part of the platform with you guys, man. There's some awesome guys here, Josh. You're taking the lead, even with the thought process of recording it.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was brilliant because I know there is even when we talk through the conversation, I know that it can be utilized for other people. Like other people could be able to listen in or should be able to listen in on it because we talk about a lot of good stuff. So for me, personally, it's just I am Willie Scott, father, married, have a beautiful wife, Rachel Scott, love her to death. to life, however you want to put it. We have 7 kids total, guys. So you guys know this. So we have 7 kids total. I know people mouth drop, 7 kids. So blended family. That's through the course of, just life and everything happening. That's where God is utilizing us in this season, is really just pouring into other blended families, pouring into marriages. We do that through resources, through our website. We do that through the books that we've written and stuff like that. So me and my wife are published authors. She does most of the writing, like 99% of it, 99.9 maybe. I threw a little 1% in there. And I do the background stuff. I like tinkering with graphic design and stuff, things of that nature. So we also we walk the journey of blending with people. So we do workshops and stuff like that for families. And then we, outside of that, our other business that we run or that we do is we help other authors walk through, or aspiring authors walk through the process of publishing their book and actually starting their own publishing company. And so that's where the other passion is at, is really just kind of educating people on the different dynamics of it when it comes to creating your own book or uploading it, copywriting, all the facets of that. So the thing I love about this group, though, is I've been to a lot of men's groups, like through church or different things of that nature. And I don't knock the men's groups. I love the camaraderie of getting together. But the similar thing I would see with the men's group is it would be a lot of activity, if that makes any sense. Like, we'll play basketball, we'll flip some tires, we'll just we'll do things like that, which is cool. But I mean, honestly, I love that stuff. But I was like, man, I'm looking, when are we gonna sit down and like dive into, like have some dialogue? Like, when we gonna actually dive into some things and have like some Bible study or get a little deeper just in conversation. And it didn't happen as often as I wanted to see it happen. And so being able to be a part of this group, at first I was like, hey, this is called the Pens of Steel, but I'm not an author. Like, even though I am an author, I don't consider myself an author in that sense, because my wife does most of the writing. And then Joshua, I love music. So that's another thing I throw out there, you guys. Most people don't know this, but I actually write music. I write Christian hip hop. We write songs. Me and my wife wrote a song together. And so he brought that up and said, hey man, you wrote songs, so you are a writer. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that part of my life. So with that being included, I stepped into the Pens of Steel, and I took on the title along with the rest of these guys that are some amazing writers. And so I just really love the dialogue that we get to have in the group. So hope everybody that's tuning in and actually get to see the video. Hope you guys enjoy it. And I'm gonna hand it back over to Josh.
All right. Awesome. So then kind of coming back a little bit too. So this group, the actual genesis of it was probably about 6 years ago. You had mentioned 6 years ago you had started blogging, Brian. 6, 7, 8 years ago. This group has changed faces a little bit over the years. I mean, primarily Brent and myself have been kind of spearheading it, but it was really about 2011, 2012, which is hard to believe now how fast time flies. But that's really when I was looking to publish a book, me personally. And I was really starving for some help. I mean, I was looking around going, there's this new thing called self-publishing. Apparently I can get my own ISBN. I can get my own cover. I can do my own, basically do my own distribution with my blog and all that other kind of good stuff. And the process was extremely overwhelming for me. And I really needed someone around me at least to bounce ideas off of, or at least be able to tell me, hey, this is wrong, or maybe this is a good idea. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe you should consider getting in the hands of this person or that person. And as I looked around, there weren't really a lot of people directly around me that could actually serve that kind of purpose in my life or be able to kind of feed me. So through some praying and asking around and hearing crickets, basically, a whole lot of nothing. And then one day it was actually Brent, your brother Nate, who had reached out to me and said, hey man, I got some poems I want to get read. I'd be really interested in having someone look at them. And it's funny how God works in a way where you're really, really hustling, you're really trying so hard, and all of a sudden the moment you just kind of say, all right, I'm done trying to do all this legwork, and then something just kind of falls in your lap. And that was exactly what happened. And then it started from Nate, and then it was Brent, and then there was actually Tim. So it was me and three brothers at one point. It was almost like a sitcom, I feel like. It was like me and the three brothers. And so these guys got brought in, but then the group just kind of exploded because, as it turns out, and I found this out through Brian, is that Cleveland is a big content generator in the United States. Is that correct, Brian? Before I go on to my next.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's something called the Content Marketing Institute based in Cleveland, sort of an enterprise level business that equips enterprise level companies in content marketing. It's huge globally. And so, yeah, I mean, just one metric, it's very interesting. Maybe it's in part because of the Content Marketing Institute, but according to Google, the most searches involving the phrase content marketing come out of the Cleveland, Ohio area, which when I first heard it, I was stunned. I thought it would be something like Los Angeles or
New York, Boston.
Yeah, some other Austin, Texas, some other great creative center, but it's Cleveland.
That was what was so just floored me, was the fact that there were so many people around me that were actually trying to do the same thing. And if I just kind of lifted my eyes up for a bit and I looked around, I found other people that were really interested in maybe writing a book or starting a platform and things like that. Because platforming, I think around 2005, 2006 is when it really started to take off. People were starting to grasp hold of this idea of, I can build my own platform. Because as I know from the stats that I was researching when I started the group, was in 2008 was the first time there were more self-published books than traditionally published books ever. And since then, self-published books have far outnumbered traditionally published books every single year, without a doubt. So to anyone listening, self-published is you own all the rights to your book, and you go to a distributor. You don't have any agent. I mean, you could have an agent, but you don't have any agent. You're not working with a huge team of writers in some tower on the East or the West Coast. There's a lot more creative control in it, and that was really attractive to me. But again, like I said, it was overwhelming. So needing a community, needing some creatives around me was just a big, big deal. So the group started to balloon. We ended up getting filmmakers, other pastors. We had some storyboard game enthusiasts. We had those involved in lovers of crime, not committing it, but crime novels, crime novels, and just anybody that was aspiring, really. So there was a lot of just kind of feeding each other that was going on at that time, and then eventually it kind of went dark. You know, life started to really kind of take a turn. You know, people were getting married or having kids and things like that, and we kind of went dark. But then it really got reinvigorated in me about a year and a half ago, and we started reaching out again, trying to kind of reinvigorate the group, because I just published my first novel, which was a big deal. I'd moved away from the old voice of satire. I moved into the voice of science fiction, and now that I was in this completely new territory, which is really where my heart has always been, this new territory, I was feeling it again. I was like, I need this creative community. I can't just be doing this all solo. And so just through some, I love that term, Willie, that you used, divine alignments, I was able to run into some different folks here. Brian, through podcasting, because I started a podcast last year. And all of a sudden now I'm talking to people that I probably wouldn't have talked to otherwise because of podcasting, which is the big reason behind this first session. Now we've kind of gone through our own intros here, is this whole concept of digital voices and how there's so many voices out there that are all over the internet, and people with different platforms and different messages that they're trying to get out there. How on earth are we supposed to navigate that, right? Like, how are we supposed to actually find out what is the best space, what's the best channel for us to figure out where we're supposed to go? And I'm going to throw this back to, I think I'm going to throw this back to Brian first on this question that I want to pose to the group is, if you do have an idea and you are going to either A, publish it or start building a platform, what's some of the first things that we really have to think about when we're first developing a platform?
When we're first developing a platform?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm I would like to say it again. It starts with writing in private,
Mm-hmm.
like even journaling, or then beginning to maybe merge into blogging or articles, or certainly starting to publish books. For me, it always goes back to writing, but we have to have a, I mean, how many know it's kind of noisy out there and there's kind of a lot of stuff being created. And
Mm-hmm.
Right.
so to get your voice heard, you have to sort of make a dent. You have to start building an audience, which starts speaking to the issue of platform building.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like marketing a product. If you build it, they will come. No, they won't come. I mean, you could build a great product and they're not going to come unless you market it well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to find the client, the customers or the clients for that product or service. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like that when you're an emerging voice in this digital age. We have to start platforming. We have to not in a not in an arrogant way, not in a way that's ugly or crass, but we have to do things to find our unique listeners and readers and customers and clients and
Mm-hmm.
whatever the application is. So somebody like Michael Hyatt, you guys are familiar with Michael Hyatt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a former CEO of Thomas Nelson, but now he's independent, has his own flourishing big thing going. But
Mm-hmm.
he wrote that book on, is it called platforming or platform or how to build
Yeah,
your?
I think he has Platform University too.
Yep.
Okay, yes, yeah. So he is like a leading cutting edge voice in this space on how to strategically, tactically build an audience over time.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
yeah,
and I mean, and just Brent, I think you had kind of brought up the last time we were talking about like what are the things that catch people, like what catches their attention, as far as when I'm just flipping open social media or Facebook or blogs or Instagram or YouTube. Like what are some tactics then where people are using to kind of hook people in to get them to the meat of whatever it is that their ultimate product. I think you had some actually good comments about that last time we were talking.
Yeah, I'll try to remember all of them. Questions. Questions are probably foremost out there. I think what we were kind of talking about was um, what really drives people's interest. I mean, anybody can create content. I mean, it's a simple thing to do now. I think what the realities that I was trying to process through, and I have been processing through for years now, and kind of going from zero social media use almost to some type of use, has me thinking like, how do we really do this in an effective way? So we were talking about some different platforms out there that really do grab hold of viewers, often short clips, often posing a question, maybe controversial question or engaging question. I think one of the models that I've been playing with personally is how to approach this. I mean, almost every successful ministry that I've engaged with has the capability to create I'm going to back up. Not every successful ministry. The ones that want to really draw in the crowd try to create a conversation. So even if you guys are podcasting or producing something, you're trying to, even though the person isn't actually speaking, they're listening in, you want to be able to form it in a way that's conversational. Mm-hmm. And so you're engaging their doubts or beliefs or thoughts on a matter. Mm-hmm. And so doing that effectively, even though the media itself is one way, you do it right and you really do captivate people. And so I guess that's kind of the area that I've been engaging with. I don't know if there was more that I added. Maybe you could speak to that, Josh, but that was kind of what I was grappling with.
Yeah, I think mostly when we think about just voices out there and all the static on social media and just on the internet in general is, I think, like you said, controversy, a controversial. It doesn't necessarily mean controversy as in terms of negativity. It could mean a topic that seems very difficult to talk about with just anybody. Like I think of some things that, like, there's a platform on YouTube right now. There's a ministry called Reasons to Believe. Hugh Ross. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he has this section called Culture Talk, and it's usually about 15 to 20 minutes long, and they just have some of the most off the wall questions to like bring people in to talk about, just either if you're Christian or non-Christian, but just some of the things they talk about is just like the question posed in the title is just so like inviting, like questions about, well, and again, this is probably leaning more towards me because I am pretty much a deep thinker, but questions like, what does theistic evolution have to do with macroevolution? Or, how can we make comments like macroevolution? Is that a real thing? Does it contradict the Bible, or does microevolution actually exist and contradict the Bible? Like really, really specific questions, and they're able to unpack it. But they draw you in with like a 2-minute clip, or they draw you in with like a 3-minute clip of them talking about it. And in many ways, it can be controversial because depending upon if they're trying to engage, say like, the scientific community from a believer's perspective, it can be a little bit controversial because the scientific community could immediately say, well, don't bring your Jesus in here. Don't bring any of that to us. We're not really interested in that. So that's just something off the top of my head I was thinking of. What about you?
But that's
Willie?
good, Josh.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that's good though, because I'm add to what Brent and what Brian said, and what you just said. It leads into it is that even with building a platform, you have to know, I want to say find your voice, if that's what you want to call it, but you have to know what you know, meaning what you want to talk about, know what you've been, you've been, I guess, geared towards to talk about, or what's in you to talk about, in a sense, what you're called to speak on. And then because like micro evolution, that would draw you in. It wouldn't necessarily draw me in. I would get drawn in if me and you were together and we start talking about it. But me just saying that by itself, I'm like, okay, it wouldn't be a title that would catch my attention. But now if I see a title about marriage, something about marriage and like a husband and a wife, or something about kids, something about blended families, because that's the vein, that's the lane that I'm in. That's what I've been called to. So it would draw anything I see on that, it catches my attention. So I'm like, oh, let's see what they're talking about. So now I'm going to listen to it. So me knowing what I'm called to, what audience I'm called to speak to, is kind of, once you start to speak with authority and you start to speak with authenticity, I feel like people will want to listen, because people want to hear what you have to say before they want to read what you've written to a certain extent. But they'll listen, especially if you're talking from an authentic point of view, and you don't seem like you're here, like you've succeeded in all the things, because then you leave people stuck in a sense of, well, yeah, you made it. I don't know how I'm gonna get there. I don't see how I'm gonna get out of this situation. But when you talk about that situation you've been in, and people can relate to it, that'll draw your audience. It draws the crowd in. So I think what you just were ending at is when you said the micro to macro, it just speaks volumes to know what you need to know and know what you're called to, and lean into that, and you can capture an audience. And of course, it's more to it, like what Brian was saying. I mean, Brian was saying, as far as that's just the beginning phase of it. Then after you go from there, then it's really about starting to draw your people in. You can blog, you can do a podcast, you can do videos, but then you want to start to brand yourself, because people are going to want to know what you're about. So branding starts at the beginning of who you are. It's just not only when you have a website and when you have your logo, when you have the colors and people can recognize Pepsi and all that stuff, but it starts with who you are. Oh, that's Willie. He's a dad. He's a husband. Oh, he has great character. That's Brent. Brent has great character. He's a dad. When I hear him speak, I pause. He doesn't speak often, but when I hear him speak, I'm sitting and I'm listening. I told you that before. So knowing that about Brent, knowing that about Brian, knowing that about you, that's where your brand starts at, and then it trickles out from there into the colors and all the other stuff that kind of captures people's attention, so then they can know what to remember what you look like. So that's just my 2 cents.
That's really
That's
good.
interesting about branding, Willie, because I think just in pop America, there's a rush to brand before there's even really any authentic core foundation to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's because we've gotten to this point where it's like branding is, okay, I need to know my colors. Got me a dope website, nice website, got me a good logo, I'm branded.
Yep.
See me, I'm going out here in the world, and that'll work to a certain extent, but also branding is people knowing who you are, what you're about. When you think of Facebook, you think of friendship, like friends connecting, social media. When you think of Pepsi or something like that, whenever I think of Pepsi, I'm thinking of like fun, or like Pepsi always got these fun commercials and different stuff like that. And I don't know what message they try to get across, but that's what I get from it. And then you think about different things. You see BP, you think of eco-friendly because they got the green colors, and then that's how they came out. They started advertising that they were this eco-friendly gas or whatever. I don't know what it is now, but that's how they brought it out. So that's the thing that you knew about them. And then you see the logo and you recognize, okay, yeah, that's BP. But when you see BP, you're also thinking like, oh, I'm gonna go to BP because they have eco-friendly gas or whatever it's supposed to be. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, that's really good. I mean, I've seen a lot of people crash and burn with that mentality. I have to brand before I have my message.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that really does kind of begin to create that sort of downward part of the funnel where you have a lot of people up top that are basically just trying to create a surface level message. And then they got some of those surface level things, maybe the aesthetics down, like you were saying, the website, the logo, maybe their name, their pen name. Okay. My pen name did not take very long for me to figure out. It was just, okay, I'm going to go with my initials. I'm not going to come up with something really dramatic. But then all of a sudden, as you begin to realize all the substance that you need beyond that surface level, that's when you start to see, I think, people starting to filter out, and the voices start to become louder as you get deeper into that substance. Those voices do become louder. They start to stand out more. And more people gravitate towards them in some way. But I think also it's a little bit frustrating too, because if you really do feel like, hey, A, I got a unique message, B, I've got some good content, and C, I feel like I've got some maybe good channels that I can work with. But then the other frustration might be, well, I'm getting crickets. I'm not getting a lot of people engaging. So like, what am I doing right, or rather, what am I not doing right? What is it that I'm doing wrong? I mean, I'll just, open that up to you guys. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's where the other stuff comes in at too. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say, you're asking about the cricket syndrome. Yeah, I know that, I mean, all of the truly authentically successful voices are saying things like, you have to keep showing up consistently.
Right.
Yeah. You got to be steadfast. You really have to create that authentic voice. I think that, we talk about this phrase, finding your voice, and a big way that we find our voice is by consistently using our voice, because it evolves over time. And, so somebody may start out with like a superficial level of branding early on, and they really they haven't been in it long enough yet to really find their authentic voice. So as they get deeper, they may change their branding, to match really who their authentic voice is. But yeah, the crickets, talk about emerging voices. I mean, a lot of voices have to carve it out of stone. They're not like popular to begin with, where, they don't have like, they're not on a television show, or they're not, a musical artist or something, or they don't preach to 10,000 people a week or whatever. Yeah. So it's a longer slog. But I think consistency, what do you guys think? Consistency is important, isn't it? Showing up all the time. Yep. And just becoming more authentic, and quality. There's a factor now of creating the wow factor, because there are so many voices, and perhaps some of them shouldn't even be out there. I hate to say that. But there's just, I mean, it's like you listen to some music and you think, well, about half of what they're playing right there could have not been written to begin with. It's just not good music, So, but we're competing with that. And So creating a wow factor, I think, like high quality content, the best quality content we can put out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at a sort of a ministry mind or mastermind thing not too long ago, and he was saying just that your content, it has to be extraordinary. You have to get on those edges that the fish are biting on. You have to, where are the conversations happening in culture?
Mm-hmm.
How can it intersect with what you can bring to the table, sort of like a Venn diagram, that overlap, sweet spot. Uh, Shoot for that. So what are they talking about? What are they asking about? What are the pain points? What are the aspirations?
Mm-hmm.
And then what do I have? How can I meet them and fish for them
Mm-hmm.
and bring value to them?
Mm-hmm.
So high quality content.
How does that work now and today? Because I think one of the other things, and again, this is for anybody, I guess, to comment on. One of the things I get overwhelmed with as far as the amount of voices are sort of the trendy topics that just seem to overwhelm everything else. I mean, is that a concern? I mean, for instance, when not that we have to have a long debate on this or anything, but it seemed like when the 2016 election was going on, politics was the number one thing people wanted to talk about out in social media. Like number one. Like that just totally overlaid everything else. And then there were new things that people were talking about. I mean, just all kinds of maybe social movements were becoming very popular on social media. How then, as far as if you are in the mind of a person that says, look, I can build something here. I have a unique message, and it's not about all the other stuff that's happening, right? Like all the things that could be newsworthy, perhaps, that people are just like they're picking and chewing up every single day. How do we kind of cut through that? Is there I don't know if there's a silver bullet necessarily, but it does seem as though that there are still pockets of spaces where people are still going, okay, I want to get away from that all that stuff that just seems to just fill my feed up constantly, and I want to get to maybe something that's more niche, listening to a podcast, or getting marriage counseling, from like a Better Than Blended, or perhaps getting some deep, insightful thought from someone like Brent, just getting something like that. What is there a hesitance you think that people might have? I mean, I think I've been overwhelmed by this thought once in a while, feeling like I have to compete with very culturally trendy topics. I don't know if you guys have even experienced this before, but I do kind of feel that sometimes, kind of that pressure to compete with it.
Yeah, excuse me. I would say yes to that. I mean, because I believe that's natural. That we especially as men, we're naturally competitive, but it's natural for any of us in the realm of what we do to say, man, you look at someone else, or you look at something or a business or a person or individual, and you're like, man, and then you look at kind of where you're at, and you're like, you think in our minds, we think we're doing the same thing. Like, why is they here? Why are we here? Mm-hmm. But we don't realize that in the process of that, we see the front row, or we see what we see on social media, or what we think we know, but we don't know the background story of what they actually have been through. How long, how many hours have they been up? How consistent have they been? Going back to what Brian said, or how much have they poured into it, and how many no's have they heard? How many doors have been slammed? How many phones been hung up in their face? How many times have they been told to go? Like, no, I don't want to hear that. But they've been consistent with it. And so they have been consistent to the point where they've built content. They've built content. They've left a trail. So as you go to Google and you look them up, nobody was listening to them or reading their blogs, or there was crickets 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. But because they were consistent with it, they've left a trail of digital footprint, as you guys said. They left a digital footprint. So now when people are coming looking for, they're like, oh, did you know about this? And then somebody shares with somebody, and somebody shares with somebody else, and then you got a blog that was from 2005 that nobody ever listened to, and in 2018 it has a whole bunch of views, whole bunch of comments, and you know that it's from 2005. Nobody else knows it's 2005. It's new to them. They just found it. And so it really goes back to, I believe, being consistent, being authentic, and moving forward and what you're supposed to be moving forward in, and knowing that it's just not your season yet. If you're everybody, there's a season for everyone, and so when that season comes, you just have to be ready. If you're not consistent in the off season, as athletes do, they kind of work out. I know you were an athlete, Josh. Me, not so much, but but I do know if you're not consistent in the off season, when the season comes, you won't be ready. So you got to make sure you're consistent in the off season.
That's right.
And I just sat here and picked Brent's brain. I'm sorry. You played dodgeball?
Dodgeball and gym, yeah.
Yeah, I played. What is it? Catch football outside on the gravel at school.
Yeah.
Two-hand touch, I hope.
Right.
Not tech. Speaking of sports, on that note, like I was duped playing Brent in racquetball once, and he was like, he was like, yeah, man, I played a couple times, at college, and I was like, oh, we're really great. There's a racquetball court at my apartment complex. Let's just play. I went out and bought a racket and balls. And I was like, I'm just gonna play with this guy, and it's gonna be a nice leisurely. I'm thinking, Brent is a little bit smaller than I am. I mean, he's got to hit it off the wall. It's not gonna be that bad. And Brent just gets in there, and he's like, all right, dude, I guess I'll just serve it. It's balls are flying. Yeah. And I'm going, I should have practiced before I came out here, you jerk.
As I recall, it was a good game. That was pretty rusty.
Yeah, and then he's like, I'm a little rusty. I'm like, no, you're not.
You would never believe this. But I went to Baldwin Wallace College. Nobody would know this, but they have like multiple national championships in Division III racquetball, and they actually have a really good program. They for quite a while, at least when I was there, they recruited some of the best in the state. And so I jumped in on racquetball after I kind of let soccer go. It was kind of my life game or my life sport, and I really enjoyed that. So I learned from some really good people. I was not even close to their caliber, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, I hung up my racket and those balls the day that we played. I hung them up.
So let me throw an idea out there back to writing and ideas. I know, Brian, maybe you can hold your thought. You had one too, but here's what I think people need to realize that we're transitioning through digitally. Yeah, you may be frustrated. I mean, the one thought I forgot to share with you was when I was sitting on that lawn chair next to the pool at Myrtle Beach reading this passage from John Eldridge, the one thought I had in my mind, even though I was reading about how he loved writing, he was somewhat ambivalent to it. Some days he really engaged with it. The one thought I had in my mind was that who on earth is going to fish my book out of the water? And that still is a very real thought for me. But I think that's what we need to realize we're going through digitally, is that it's not going to be, and it's not going to be in 10 to 20 years. The big names that you hear and know and that have the cash to produce these channels are not going to be at the same level. The democratization, if you will, of these channels is only going to raise the bar. So I think everybody's maybe a little worried that everything's getting watered down, but that's not how it works. The rise of digital voices will be those who, like you said, are consistent. But I'm going to speak from my Christian perspective. The godly voices that will rise up will be seated hearing from the living God. So they're really going to be positioned well. And it's kind of like I kind of look at it, like in reverse, you have to realize the term that's been used is gatekeepers. So for a long time, ABC, NBC, CNN, BBC, all these big names, Fox, have been the gatekeepers of information.
Yeah.
So what happens when all that information is now produced by anybody?
Yep.
Well, for one, they're caught on the run trying to figure out how on earth to get their ideas to be more important than everybody else's. And so we're kind of in an interesting spot. And let me just pose this idea to you. I think we're in the spot, and maybe this is my Christ following attribute. If you're not a Christ follower, that's okay. I'm trying to speak from my perspective, but I think it's going to be moving as a unit that's going to produce some real quality things. That's one of the reasons I really love engaging with other like thinkers. We've grown so much. But when I truly look at my own media habits, I have grown leaps and bounds over the past few years, just because I can engage without somebody threatening my thought upon somebody preaching a sermon in Australia that happened 4 years ago, where they're seeing the miraculous happen. And I'm learning intuitively on not only secrets of the kingdom, but just the depth of knowledge that can be placed upon these weird, almost unknown places. I really believe there's going to be a rise of information that's going to come, and those who can be seated, confident, comfortable, are really going to kind of take that by force. That's what I believe. I don't know, maybe you guys have different thoughts on that. I know, Brian, you had another thought too, but just pose that for you guys.
No, you've spawned a thought. I'll interject. I was running across some stats here on a video I just watched recently on YouTube. I don't know what the global population is now, something like 7.5 billion, maybe it's a little bit more. And he was giving a statistic that in 2017, just last year, the global population was, I guess, 7.5 billion, and 40% of that population was connected to the internet. That's amazing. Even 40% of the globe's population on the web. Now, certainly there are some of those people that are living in specific countries where they're really not on the global web as such, because they filter out, like China does some of that, I think, and certainly North Korea, countries like that. But just look at the big trend line, 7.5 billion, 40% on the web. Now, that the experts are saying that in the next 5 to 10 years from 2017, so we're in that now, that if technology increases just linear, not exponential, but just an increase linearly, is that the word? In technology, it'll go from 40 to, it'll jump to 66%.
Wow.
Of the planet's population will be connected to the web. But they're saying that technology will not grow in a linear fashion. It will be more like exponential, because of like Google, Facebook, and even SpaceX is somehow getting involved in the web with providing, so they're saying even higher than 66%. So you're right, Brent. It has the web. You have the silicon chip, the PC, the web. It has democratized basically the globe in terms of this gatekeeper issue, and access to information and access to other voices. And, it's not crimped in those channels like ABC or BBC or, so we have opportunity and responsibility, and everything's accelerating. I think it's a great accelerator of not only knowledge and information, but even from like a Christian worldview within the body of Christ, it's accelerating understanding across the body of Christ around the world.
I think you really hit that well as far as the responsibility aspect of it, because I think all of us can agree that it can go awry very quickly, just with trying to, it goes back to that again, finding your unique message and knowing what it is that you actually can bring to the table that is of substance for people. Because I think so much of what happens from again, from a secular mindset. Again, if you're not a Christian listening to this, this is coming from our perspective, again, from a Christian perspective, but from a more maybe momentary mindset of just information gets out there, we download it, we ingest it, we make sort of quick decisions about it as far as the knowledge or the understanding may be, and then it either can derail us as far as from maybe where the truth is, or it can, nosedive us into the truth in some sense, right? I mean, there's just information that can accelerate that process of coming to a greater depth of understanding, and there's information out there that can totally send us off into left field or outer space and go down the rabbit hole. I mean, I dialogue a lot with I got 5 brothers in my family, no sisters, and all 5 of us are all these sort of deep thinkers, and I won't mention any names among the group, even though there probably would be a few of us who can go down those rabbit holes of conspiracy theories, and you can find all you're looking for on the internet as far as conspiracies go, and strange phenomenon, and people out there that again, digital voices, people who have a voice, they have a unique message tailored around this idea of maybe the Nazis are hiding under the Antarctic, right? And they have a whole video series on it, or they can talk about this, and they got huge followings for it too. So it's not all just filled with what would be considered maybe positive or even good messaging.
No.
I mean, there's so much messaging out there that can really derail people and send them down just all kinds of paths of even potentially hysteria, and just paranoia too. So I think that responsibility piece that you touched on was just really, really something, because we don't necessarily think of responsibility. I think when you're working on building your message, and you're like, maybe I got a message, I got something that I think other people would care about and might benefit from, and it might be a passion of mine or something I want to share with people, like Willie, like blended families, okay?
Yeah.
And you may have this message, but you may not be thinking like, I'm going to be responsible for this in 5 years when someone else picks this up and looks at it. Like, are we thinking about those kinds of things, right? Like, what will this person think of when they first find my video 5 years from now or 6 years from now on my podcast or whatever? So are those the kinds of things? Not to get overwhelmed in this concept, but this responsibility aspect of it, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah. I think that's a point well taken. And I think we're responsible, like upstream from that, we're like even responsible because of the opportunity, the opportunity that we have to enter the fray, so to speak, to enter the marketplace of ideas. Mm-hmm. And because of technology and because of the ease and the lack of the big gatekeepers, if we just sit, and don't lift our voice, we're responsible for that. I feel that responsibility. But then once we're in there, your point is well taken too. We're responsible for what we say and the content, and that as best we can understand it, that it's true for us, and that it's an authentic voice.
Mm-hmm. Just kind of continuing along that lines, like how do we might have talked about this a little bit, but I just was thinking about how do we ultimately develop an authentic voice? What are some ways to actually figure that out? Because my story personally, I thought I was going to be this satirical humorist. I still chuckle a bit when I read things from like the Babylon Bee or the Onion. I think those are pretty funny websites. So I will casually go to that line and I go, man, I really wish I could maybe write some for these guys. Maybe I should send in a few articles, just be like, hey, what do you think of this? Maybe could I write for you guys? But then I always kind of draw myself back and I think, well, you know what, that's fun and all, and that's kind of interesting, but I'm not really like waking up in the morning thinking about it. I'm not really feeling energized by the thought of doing it. It'd be fun to do or something, but as far as building authenticity and a genuine message amidst all the other ones, it can be very easy to try to become a copycat, right? I mean, is that something that is a reality? I mean, Willie, your guys' ministry, I can't. I mean, I've never really Googled blended family ministry before, but I mean, are you guys aware of anybody else that has like a platform like that?
Yeah. There's a gentleman by the name of Ron Deal, and there's quite. So I would say Family Life. Ron Deal is with Family Life, and Family Life is, I believe it's a nonprofit or for profit, but they have a blended family section, and they are probably, I would say they are probably, Ron Deal is one of the pioneers to that, and it's probably somebody else before him, because I'm not gonna say probably, there is, because he told us the story of the gentleman, I can't remember the gentleman's name, that the kind of like pioneer before him and handed it off to him. But they've been doing a lot for blended families for a long time. And they still have, I believe, in my opinion, there's still struggles even at that level where they're at, that they would be considered, because as we were coming up, as we were actually pushing forward and reaching out, ours started off as just being like a blog. It started off being a blog, and then it built into what it is now. But as we start to pursue more, we would get that question all the time. Hey, have you guys connected with Ron Deal? Have you guys heard of Ron Deal? You guys heard of Ron Deal? So we would hear his name often. And we did have the opportunity to meet with him and kind of sit down with him, talk to him, and share our hearts and stuff like that with it. But also, I believe in this season that I know that there's a lot of little pockets, and I don't want to use the word little because I don't mean it in a demeaning way, but there are a lot of smaller pockets of people that are trying to gain traction with this blended family thing, and they have good intentions and good hearts at hand, and and for whatever reason they may not be getting the traction that they desire. But as we continue to move forward, because there was a point in time where we were like, man, we're not getting any traction, and it's still sometimes where things will come up and we'll be like, man, we're not getting a lot of feedback or responses on that. But because we've been called to that, we still have to pursue it. I think it goes back to that, because even when you both were saying responsibility, that's one of the things that fueled us. And I think back on it is that there's a responsibility there's somebody out there that's talking about this thing in the wrong way. And me as a Christian, I have a responsibility to talk about it in the right way. And I know people can say right and wrong is subjective to whatever you think, but based on my perspective of what right is, based on my biblical perspective of what right is, I have a responsibility to relay this information for families in a way that is I call it family discipleship, in a way that is discipling families and bringing them into the knowledge of Christ. And it's not always done in a preachy way. It may be done in a very secular realm, but still not in a preachy way. But we just do it in a way that will be authentic, but it will also be very relational, and will be on the level of those that can understand it, so that we can draw them in. It's all about drawing people into what you're doing. So I think it goes back to that, back to responsibility, and it goes back to bringing people in and being consistent. Because if you just if you not getting traction now and you give up, then the people that you were assigned to, because I believe everybody has an assignment of those that they're going to affect, whose lives they're going to touch. The people that you were assigned to affect, they'll never get to hear it. They'll never pick the book up. They'll never read the blog. They'll never see any of it if you quit. And then what does that leave them? Now, I'm of the belief that because I'm a Christian, that God is still going to get the message to them one way or another, but he intended to use you. Right. But then you stopped because you didn't see instant fruit. So,
yeah, I mean, I think we have to think of our voice in that transcendent kind of a way, Willie, that there is a higher purpose to it. And this recent ministry mastermind thing I was a part of, this guy, he has 70 or 80,000 people that follow his blog. He's been doing it for years. He's written 20 books, I think 12 traditionally published, 8 maybe independent, and of those 12, some bestsellers. But he said, you got to leave the results. You got to relinquish the results on this thing in terms of like, what is your readership or what you're following or what's your audience size? He said, if it was just like 10 or 12 people, I would do it until I die. If he only had 10 or 12 people listening to him, he said it something like that. I'm a lifer. I'll do it till I die, because he felt that sense of like destiny or calling about it.
Right.
And responsibility. So there's a sense in which, yes, we have to do what we can do to fill up. I agree with you, Willie. We have a sphere that we're called to, and maybe that sphere enlarges over time. But we have this sphere of reach, and we just have to be satisfied and faithful to that somehow.
Right. I think I just want to piggyback off that too. That was so good, Brian, because it reminds me of, I think I told you about this, Josh, of this organization. The lady name is Shay Bynes, and she has an organization, or her company is Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. And the content that she produces is so incredibly valuable that it talks about, it's called Grace Over Grind. And so what she ultimately talks about is that everybody has this hustle, grind till I die, or get up, or whatever they say as far as grinding, meaning if I don't do it, it won't happen. I got to put the work in. Now, there is a level of responsibility that we're called to put in the work and put our hand to the plow, as you would say. But also, we can't get to the place. That's what her whole message is. We can't get to the point where we're carrying all the weight on our shoulders and we thinking that it's me. This is me. I did this. I built this. I need to do this. Because once you do that, then you're responsible for it. And then you limit the growth of whatever it is that you're called to do. But once we follow the leading of God as whatever he's called us to do, and whatever he's called us to speak to in that season, and not to worry about the numbers, because we're not doing it for the numbers. We're doing it because this is what our responsibility is. This is what he called us to do. And we just move faithfully in that. Then he's going to bring the numbers regardless. Like, he's going to bring the numbers that he desired to bring, whether it's one, whether it's few, whether it's many, whether it's millions. He's going to bring the numbers, and everybody, I still believe everybody has an assignment of the amount of people they're supposed to touch in a certain season, with a particular message and whatever that message may be. And it doesn't always stay the same. It may change. So,
yeah.
That's really good. I mean, my brain is just like really going right now, like thinking about thinking of all the stuff you guys were talking about. I mean, there was two takeaways, and I was trying to mentally think of them as you guys were summarizing all that. And the one thing that was really good was Brian had mentioned about how the gentleman was saying that if only 10 or 12 people were listening to him, that he would be getting up and
do it to die,
every day till he dies. And I think that was really hitting on the question I had posed initially about how do you be authentic? How do you figure out what your voice is to be authentic with, and how do you develop a unique message? And it really is not this end result of many, many numbers. Now, granted, that's a real goal. Your real goal is that you want to be able to expand and create the larger sphere, like you were talking about, Brian. Like, let's just be honest. We want to be able to have a greater impact, more influence. We want to be able to do those kinds of things. But really, the key of it is that am I rooted in a heart's desire that even if I have an audience of 5 or 6, and these people are really being fed by that message, that really is my unique voice. Then that really is the unique voice that is creating fruit, and there is some kind of life that is coming out of it, right? Like, there's life-givingness that's coming out of it. And I think the draw too, because again, I'm kind of bringing this back around to what I was talking about, because both you guys are really making me think, is the comparison aspect of the digital age. Going back to how I have to compare myself to other people. I've only got 1,000 followers, on my Instagram, and such who's doing sci-fi has 1,500. What's the deal? I better hurry up and buy that sponsored ad and make sure that I'm now trying to reach more people, and in creating more influence, getting my fingers on or out there in the digital realm, with more people.
I mean, one of the things, Josh, we could talk about is that we could talk about like our digital footprint. We look at that person and we say, man, that guy's like Bigfoot. He's got this huge following. He's got an email list of tens of thousands and social media. But there's also the issue of what is the quality of that footprint, because a lot of people have big footprints, but their audience is not engaged.
Right.
There's a lot of people that are in that footprint that are not quality contacts. It's better to actually have a smaller footprint that's more engaged, you know, and that are helping you to proliferate your message and a conversation with, like Brent was talking about, building conversations, than having a huge sort of a half dead, you know, footprint. There's that aspect of it too. It's just a practical aspect.
Well, I'll just throw it out there. I mean, let's think of you know, Jesus and the 12 disciples. I mean, that's like, it's pretty much the ultimate model there, right? I mean, as far as you have a really small, tight-knit tribe, and they follow you around for 2 to 3 years. I think I actually heard this on another podcast maybe I was listening to, maybe with you, Brian, or someone was talking about the benefits of having 10 or 12 people around you, you know, for an extended period of time that actually do support and encourage, but also really believe in your message. And you kind of, there's almost a reciprocation there as far as the message is concerned. And that as that consistency is built, then it is ready now to actually be released to other people. It's ready for other people to actually see it and hear that message, because now it's more complete. It actually has a more complete feel to it, as opposed to just launching it and saying, here I am, world, you know, here I am, you know, here's my brand, here's everything that I've been writing and everything. And oh my gosh, I mean, I just, such delusions of grandeur when I first started blogging, man. It was like,
we all did.
Man, I remember when I published my first book, Epiphanies, Theories, and Downright Good Thoughts. I don't even know if all of you guys know this, but the Epiphanies, Theories, and Downright Good Thoughts, ... made while playing video games was my first book. It was my first book. It was this great deep dive of philosophy about video games and the generation that grew up on them, and I won't say it's my best work, but it was my first dive into publishing and finding my voice. And the funniest thing is that I published this thing. I remember sitting at home or even at work and checking like the sales rankings on Amazon and checking them on like Barnes and Noble, and I'd see it kind of tick up for a while, and then it would just, you know, and you know, a week later it's still going down, and it's still going down, and it's me sitting there going, why is no one buying this thing? It's ready, it's out there, it's available. And then suddenly the realization sticking in of, dude, you haven't marketed this thing. You don't even have like you know, any kind of website. You've told your aunt and your uncle. You've told your brothers. There's a very, very small sphere, you know, that knew about this thing at the time of the launch. Like, my gosh. So it's like those kinds of lessons that you learn, you know. Just
it's like authors, especially early authors, I think they're notorious for that magical thinking.
I know.
You know? Like, if you write it, they will come. You know? Oh, they won't.
Right. That's another reason numbers. I'm not gonna say numbers are not important, but relationship it outranks numbers, because just like Brian said, you could have 10,000 people on your following you. You could have, and I would get this a lot. A lot of people would think, like, oh, you got an email list of 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000. That's pretty cool. Like, no, I'm trying to go through the email list and take people that's not active. I'm taking them out. Well, why would you do that? Because you can use that, and then I gotta pay for that. Like, the more people that come on your email, then the cost of the email monthly cost goes up. And if I have people on there that's not participating, why would I want to keep them on there? But beyond that, it goes down to the tight niche builds relationship, and not that everything has to be tight niche, but the greater the number, then in some cases you lose quality of relationship, and you don't always have to lose that. But I do believe that's why we shouldn't be so fixated, even though we are. I've been there, like looking at numbers, like, oh man, we got to get here. Looking at sales, like, oh man, we got to get here. Why we got this many people? Why it's not translated into more sales? Because the relationship wasn't there, and it was just numbers that we just invited people. But it was a click of a button, and they clicked the button back, and they was there. But I hadn't had a conversation with them. I hadn't really dialogued with them. They hadn't watched the video. They didn't even know us. So I'm expecting this click of a button, them clicking the button back means that they're gonna automatically buy a book, and it doesn't work like that, because again, there was no relationship built. And I believe that God will, if we stop looking at the numbers and we rely on Him to bring the numbers that we need, whether it's 5 or 10, or whether it take 5 years or 10 years, He knows the timing for one, and he knows the level of relationship he wants built up, because he knows the fruit that's going to be produced from that. So you can have 10,000 numbers and have zero fruit. Like I rather have more fruit with less numbers than have more numbers and no fruit at all. So
Yeah,
that's good.
Yep.
That's really good. So, kind of, I want to bring this thing in for a landing. This is a lot of really good information here for this first session of ours to kind of just talk about just the digital voice age and just all the different, I think you've kind of coined it, the voice wars, in a sense. How do we go from here then? I mean, as far as where you guys are at currently, we kind of talked a little bit about where each of us is at in terms of our digital footprint and where we're going. I wanted to kind of give each of us an opportunity to just kind of talk about, where we're at right now and maybe what are we experimenting with? Like what are some things that we're trying to do right now as we're learning? Because I don't think any of us can proclaim to be experts in the area of just even writing. But as far as just trying to learn this thing about, getting your voice heard, getting your unique message out there, what are some things that we're experimenting with it right now for each of us? So I'll kick it back to my main man, Brent, the prophet, first. We'll let you kind of chime in there first, man.
You guys have to stop calling me a prophet.
I was gonna chime in, Brent, on the last time when you were speaking. But you were talking, so I want to jump over top. But I was like, see, that's why he's called the prophet. Did y'all hear that?
The term,
I've spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of my life kindling my relationship with God in writing, and I'm ready to die. Today, if my flight doesn't make it back, from my hotel room where I am now, I'm ready. And I think that's the message. The bedrock is always truth. So we always have to be expecting to people that we're speaking to people that aren't ready to die. That's the key. My hope is somebody will tune into this. Maybe we'll break a portion up of this, and then they'll tune into the whole thing. But isn't that what everybody's after? They're trying to figure out, what to live for, and being prepared to die is, man, I tell you what, it's the most freeing thing in the world to have your bags packed, your passport punched, ready to go. And so I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours kindling my relationship with God, asking what is my voice. And I believe in everything that we spoke tonight, that God's going to put his stamp of approval. If you don't believe in God, that's okay. I get it. I challenge that in what Willie was saying earlier. Sometimes people jump around with the idea of subjective truth, but to even make that claim, that's an objective claim. And I love you, but ultimately we're trying to make the decision on truth. And so that's what we do, and that's how we act. And so as we have social media presences, as we have family members that we interact with by group message or however that is, we're kind of at that level where we have to decide how to do that. And so, yeah, I've cultivated a voice inside of me. Maybe you see it kind of coming through a little bit right now, of just a humility, a basis for living the very best offering of a life to God that I can, and not always succeeding at that, but kind of resetting to that point.
Right.
I think that's what we're after as content creators. And the statement I said earlier about how I believe that there will be elevated voices in this information revolution. That's what we're in. you can chase the dead ends for a while. Pornography's fun for a while. The 25% of internet viewed on the internet is pornography, but it ends. There's a season that it will no longer fulfill you. Other things you can chase for a while as well. You could chase relationships. You can chase your career. It's good to produce and be effective in what you do, but ultimately it ends, and it'll always give you less than what you put into it. It'll always give back just a little bit less than what you wanted. And so I guess for me, I know you're trying to land this plane, Josh, but for me, ultimately it's truth. It's objective truth. It's something that we're all trying to find. And all of our sinful pasts will take our own way. But ultimately, is there really somebody out there? Is there really a core group here on planet Earth that really has mastery over these things that drive us crazy? And I guess I'm here as that voice, that there is a way to be free and a way to live that way. And I do believe we have to advance as a unit. That enemy's crafty, and he loves doing things to not just you, but everything that is important to you to distract you. And so it's a unit that we move as, maybe like the Roman army, where they had the shields, and the ones in the front would lock the shields together, and the ones on the top would hold their shields above and advance like that. I kind of think that's the way that we have to advance in the media world. So that's my 2 cents.
Wow, that's good stuff.
That's good stuff, man. I think they call that a phalanx, right? The phalanx.
What's that?
The phalanx. That's the
right.
style of combat. I think that's what that is.
Yeah.
For all the history buffs out there.
Yep.
Right.
Is that the Roman phalanx, or did that come from the Greeks or Romans? I think the Romans did it, I know.
Yeah, Romans did it. I think the Spartans claimed it too. I think
Okay, it probably goes back to the Greeks, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, so good stuff, Brent. Good stuff, man. We're going to continue to help you cultivate that voice, man. So
yeah.
Good
and
stuff.
you've done nothing to help your claims of not being a prophet, Brent. Okay.
I know. Yeah, you guys gotta stop calling me that. Here's some big bombs now for you from my from my thoughts and my alone time with the Lord. So good stuff, man. So Brian, then.
Yeah, I think that our voice, we sort of have a lifetime voice, and I think it like builds over the course of our lifetime. Have you guys felt that or seen that?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
like our voice earlier, it's different now. Hopefully it's more mature and more seasoned and bigger and better. But I think that there's some things we can do to really like cooperate with that enhancement of our voice. And I just jotted down here, one of the things is to really tap into the voice signature of the Creator, because it's like his voice awakens our voice, Right. So like, and again, this is coming from a Christian worldview, but like in prayer or in the Word, we start to pick up his voice signature better, and it awakens our voice, makes it more clear and strong, I think. But I think journaling's important. I think quality conversation's important. Quality think time. All of these things enhance our voice and elevate it. As far as, what was your question? What are we doing new, or what's some new tech?
Like what would you say you might be experimenting with right now as far as in the digital voice realm?
Sure. One of the things I'm on the edge of and wanting to get deeper into is like that Venn diagram, where it overlaps in the middle and you got that sweet spot. And so the one circle represents the conversation that's happening out there in the world. And there are tools today to do a deep dive into what are people asking about. what are their pain points? What are their aspirations? We're talking about like Google, Google data, and even data like on Amazon. Amazon, you have Google as the biggest search engine. I think YouTube, which is owned by Google, and then Amazon is the third largest search engine. And there are tools to even go onto Amazon. What books are people buying? How many of those books are being sold? What questions are they asking to buy those books? It gives you a good pulse in the culture about the conversation. So I'm kind of on the edge of experimenting with that and using a tool or two to help get a better picture of that. And then so the other circle where it overlaps, the one circle is the conversation. That's all sort of you can discover it through metadata, through Google Analytics and Amazon Analytics. And the other circle though is your voice. And so what is it in your voice that can speak to what they're talking about? That overlaps. You need to pay attention to that spot right there.
Oh yeah.
So that's something. And then guys, I'm just interested.
That's good, Brian. That's huge. I like that.
Well, we need to keep talking about it because I think it's important and we need to grow in it, I want to talk with you guys about it. But I think that I'm not interested in content just for like building numbers or even monetizing content only. I mean, I am interested in sustainable models that work, financially, for example. But what does content create? What does it do? Does it create movements? Does it create new relationships, new connections that are designed to happen? Can there be new goods and services coming out of content that the world's asking for, that just begging for it? So like outcomes of audience building and content creation. Looking further downstream, I got to look further downstream than how many people visited my website this week.
Yep.
Actually, and running with other voices too is important, which we're doing here. But running with other voices. So let's look further downstream. What are outcomes that we're actually looking for that move the needle in this world on causes and justice issues, freedom.
That's good. That's really good. Cool.
So that's me right now. That's a snapshot anyway.
That's a good snapshot, man. That's a pretty good as far as a broad lens of just a lot of good stuff that I think you're diving into that I think a lot of people wouldn't really necessarily be there yet. As far as if they were just starting out, they'd probably still be thinking about what their voice is, but they may be dabbling into the stuff like that. I think that what you're talking to right now, Brian, which is just, hey, I've got this platform now. I mean, Jesus Smart primarily is what you're doing as far as content creation right now, right? I mean, as opposed to blogging and things like that, correct?
Yeah, blogging on Jesus Smart as well as podcasting.
Yep. So, good, excellent stuff, man. Willie, how about you, man?
I was trying to sit here and think. I'm like, I don't know what to say. No,
that's all we saved you for last, man.
Right.
You were supposed to be sitting there going, all right, I got everything I'm gonna say.
I know. I was trying to. I was like, thank you, Josh. And then I get here. No. As far as digital footprint, I mean, I see some new things that we're trying is definitely, for me personally, is the rest. And me and my wife are doing the same thing, but I know I'm trying to lean into it a little bit more, is going back to what I said about the grace over grind thing. It's not feeling that I have to make everything happen, that I actually have to stay up super late because I mean, of course, there are times where work has to get done and I do have to do that, but not thinking that I have to, I got to stay up to 5 a.m, 3 a.m. I'm being consistent with this grinding and grinding and grinding because I'm trying to make things happen, trying to take things to the next level, and really resting in the fact that I didn't start this thing in the first place, and it's not going to be me that's going to take it to the next level. I'm going to play a role in that. I'm going to be used in the process of that, but really being obedient and keeping my ear, if you want to say, to the ground, in a sense of just spending time, like Brent said, just read. I need to trying to get myself to that place, which you, Josh, is being consistent with just the hours, as Brent said, with just spending time with God, spending time with Him to hear what it is that we're supposed to be doing in the season that we're working in. What am I supposed to be doing today? What am I supposed to be doing this morning? How am I supposed to be navigating through some of these things, these emails, or some of the ideas, or some of the opportunities that may present themselves, or that have presented themselves? How am I supposed to navigate through those? And how am I supposed to prepare for the future ones? And so that's something that I'm just really working on, is just the resting thing. And then as far as just digitally wise, right now me and my wife are spending more time. God is really opening up opportunity for our publishing and design business. And we've been seeing, Better Than Blended we started that in 2014. And even with Better Than Blended being where is that, we've been seeing more traction. Better Than Blended is a lot of outgoing. It's not a whole lot of incoming. I mean, it's some, but it's a lot of putting out for it. But we've been seeing more opportunities presenting themselves when it comes to the design portion of it, as far as the writing. And it's been really fun, really talking to. We started off just had a workshop, and it was a lot of older people that came, and just talking to them about really leaving a legacy for their family. That's what their desire was, to leave a legacy for their family. So we're really leaning into that. Like, we created a workshop called Legacy Letters, and we just talk about that. We talk about the blueprint for self-publishing. So that's kind of where our footprint is going now, is where God is leading us to, is really just diving into the publishing aspect and really pouring out the knowledge He's given us. And we just giving it freely to people. And we have some people that want to pay us, go figure, that they say, hey, thank you for the free information, but I don't want to do it by myself. Can you guys help me do it? And so that's the stuff that I'm talking about. We could have went to the workshop and tried to oversell, like, hey, here's some information, or we could have been stingy with the information and said, here go a little tiny piece of tasting this. Now for the rest of it, you got to buy it. But that's not what we were called to do. We were called to share it unreservedly. And we still receive fruit from even doing that, because we're being obedient to what was called. So, I mean, that's just where we at right now, is diving into that portion of it and just really trying to fall back and be obedient to what God's calling us to do.
It's really good, Willie. I just heard something, Willie, and this is coming from people that I don't know they're Christians. It's not coming from at least anything that's presenting itself to be Christian, but they're saying, share everything you learn right away. And they're saying, teach everything you know.
Right.
And they're actually saying that as a business model.
Right.
Just give it all away as fast as you can.
Right.
It's interesting.
What's interesting about it, even more interesting about it, is that people will take that and they will say, oh, that's a really good business model. And we don't, and not give credit, or even not know where the credit is really comes from, because that's just wisdom. That's wisdom that's biblically based, to give it all away. It's better to give than to receive. That's just wisdom. That's that's biblically based. But we'll take these things and we look at it and like, oh yeah, that's from the United States. Like, yeah, but it's founded from right here. Exactly. I can open this book up and show you the pages. Yeah. So absolutely. It's some really close similarities. Y'all didn't. Yeah. They're like, nah, I don't know about that. So, yeah. But we just have to keep presenting these things, and not necessarily like holding the book up and presenting them, but we just present it with our lives and our actions, as how we relate to people, how we conversate, how we interact with clients or customers or whatever it is. That's one thing I can say, that the conference we had, we were aiming for the conference we had in October. In our mind, we were aiming for this huge conference, and huge in our minds it was like 400 people, and that's not even huge because I've seen conferences with 4,000 people, 10,000 people, you know, but in our minds 400 people was huge. And so in our conference that we actually had, the turnout, it was maybe about 40 people, 40 or 50 people, or somewhere around there. And do you know the impact of that was incredible with that small number? The one thing that was consistent through just all of the surveys they filled out, literally a lady stopped me and talked to me for probably like 40 minutes and just told me how relational she felt. One of the vendors that was there sent us an email back and said, you know, I really felt cared for, and I felt that you guys loved me. Like, these are the words he used in his email. He said, I felt that you guys loved me, and I felt cared for, how you guys kept checking on me. He said, I've been to a lot of conferences, and that, you know, that wasn't the situation. It's not that he looked for it or whatever, but
yeah,
that smaller number had a greater impact than what we thought. But it was intentional, and what we thought we needed to do and what we thought we needed to be, and all the things that we went out and got, trying to get this bigger venue. Oh, we need more of this. We need more of that. That's not going to be enough because we're looking for 400 people. Once we kind of scaled back and just sat silently and listened, we figured out that it wasn't 400 people. We figured out that it didn't need to be as big, so we scaled down. And once we did all that, we dropped some of the speakers off that, you know, that it just needed to happen. It wasn't that they were bad speakers or anything. They were amazing speakers, and we really wanted them there. But that wasn't what we were being informed to do as we sat down and listened to it. And that thing had huge impact, man. Like, I don't know. I was in tears at the end. I was holding back though, but I was in tears inside eternally. But I was also just I was amazed at how well it turned out, and the feedback we got back from people saying like, this was a really relational conference. Like, I've been to many conferences where it has some really good speakers, really dynamic speakers, and I didn't feel the connection that I felt here. Right. And so that's what's important. That's what's important to me is now I've read from that conference, that took me to a different level in relationship and what I expect out of relationships and what I need to pour back into relationships. So
that's good, man. Oh, that's really good. Good stuff. Well, for me, before we close all this out, then primarily, I think my first observation is that all of us within this group have, I think, varying degrees or areas of, you know, just entrepreneurship as far as writing and, you know, just having a digital footprint like we've been talking about throughout this whole thing. So I think that's a really valuable asset to kind of keep us, I think, level with each other as far as being able to share good information, coming from not having a footprint yet or even having a little bit further down the line and finding new avenues like you were saying, Willie, you know, like with TKI. Even though you guys had started better than Blended, you were saying a lot of things going out, more coming in from this other area. It's okay to embrace that, right? You know, and you know, you guys talking about evolving voices as they go, because that's kind of been my theme, has been an evolving voice. I mean, just that first book, that Epiphanies Theories book, and then I had all these big thoughts of like a series of books I was going to do, you know, every 8 or 9 months were going to come out. They're going to be awesome. And, you know, I was on the train of buying like bookmarks and just all kinds of paraphernalia that was going to go along with it. And then literally sitting back and going, wait a second, my heart is not really in this. You know, this is not actually where I think my voice is supposed to carry itself. And so kind of getting realigned with, you know, where, you know, God actually said, hey, do you really just want to be another angry voice among the masses? Is that really what your goal is? Is that really what you want to do? And I kind of very humbly said no. Like that, you know, like a tail between my legs kind of thought or image. And that has totally taken me in a different direction. And so my experimentation with this whole digital voice age has been, how do I continue to hone the unique message now that I know what it is? You know, how do I do that? You know, what channels do I work with? You know, who should I try to engage with? You know, who should I not be afraid to ask questions of? Or, you know, and not be afraid of the rejection maybe that I might have been before, where I might have been more fearful because I wasn't totally owning the idea, and now I'm ready to own the idea. So there's a lot more stuff that I'm willing to do now with this new voice that I have that I wasn't before. Doing the podcast, starting the podcast myself last year was a huge step. Just going like, Lord, like what else, do I want to be doing? And it was kind of a little bit of catharsis in the beginning, a little bit of therapy doing a podcast. But man, I mean, it's gotten me connected with you, Willie, with Brian, with Jason also from Substance. It's re-engaged just the creative group in general, how this group has come back together again. So it clearly has. The more I've recognized that taking, I don't want to say calculated risks, but it's risks where I've moved in increments, and when I see the next door that's open, I just try to go through it and see, well, God, is this where I'm supposed to go next? Is this where you want me to go? And if it's like, nope, come back, go to the next one. And where I just feel like I was so hesitant before, now I have a lot more confidence than I did before, especially with like even doing this thing right here, this session with you guys. So that's where I'm really at, aside from just finishing the second novel, which has been kind of the bane of my existence for the last 2 years. And you guys know this. Some of my listeners know that on the Writer's Lens. And just...
Elephant has a gestation period of 18 months. Do you know that?
Well, in my case, I'm working with like a mammoth-sized gestation period, because it has just been, it has been taken just, oh man, just crushing me on all this. But it's been really good, and learning more and more about myself and how I work. Sometimes you think you know how well you work at something, and then all of a sudden you realize when a new curveball is thrown your way, you're not swinging as well as you thought. Yeah,
right.
That's kind of been my experience, but.
I definitely learned that through our process.
What's that?
I said I definitely learned that through the process of working with my wife. Thinking I was good at something and figuring out that I was okay at it, but I was better at delegating. And really? I should have.
Yep.
Right.
It's funny. I've listened to a lot of and this is just a real quick sidebar before we pull this thing in. I've listened to a lot of different psychological analyses of the Book of Genesis, and it's one of the prevailing themes that I find from anybody, whether they're secular or Christian or otherwise, is that one of Eve's greatest contributions to Adam is the fact that she makes him self-conscious. That's one of her greatest contributions to Adam, is she totally makes him self-conscious.
Oh my goodness.
You thought you were good at that?
That's a rabbit hole we could really run down.
Yeah, you thought you had good hygiene. You thought you had things together. You thought you were organized. You really weren't. You were not at all. Not even close.
There's nothing like our wives to unzip us, man. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's part of the sharpening.
Yep.
It hurts sometimes, but then that blade gets sharper and sharper. So, yeah. I mean, in the moment. I know there's many times in the moment I just be frustrated. I just look like, who asked you anyway? But and I don't say it without thinking in my head,
right.
real loud in here.
There's wisdom there too, Willie, with that comment. I think there was
right. But then I see the sharpening. So
yep.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Wow.
So. Excellent stuff, gentlemen. Thank you again for participating in this first recorded session. I think this is a good place to end for the Pens of Steel in this first, rather, just kind of get together to kind of invite us into this digital voice war / unique messaging that we're trying to hone. So I continue to look forward to the dialogue we'll be having, guys. So thanks again.
Yeah, I'm not going to be happy unless this has 100,000 views.
Didn't we just talk about this?
Talk about that.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, man.